Tera is old, plain and simple. But just like all games that embody the fun factor that we want them to, age really doesn't bring it down much. Tera mixes things up for the genre it's in by including real-time combat with dodging, magic, and a variety of attacks all operating like an action game. Originally released in certain areas in 2011 and to a wider audience in 2012, Tera has had a lot of time to make its way into being one of the more popular MMOs, with lots of players still supporting it. Tera's learning curve isn't as steep as most other games in the genre, which makes it more of a fit for the console world than other MMOs would be. It doesn't throw too much at you at the beginning and sports a very clean UI that usually makes sense and can get you where you want to go in just a couple of button presses. These and many other elements make Tera make a lot of sense for consoles, which I'm sure is a delight for lots of longtime and new players of the genre. Tera is indeed a fun game with lots of addicting gameplay loops and grinds that add up to an experience that doesn't stand out as well as it did several years ago, but still holds up nicely if you're looking for a neatly organized MMO experience with a decent story. Speaking of story, Tera's lore is pretty typical RPG fare. The two characters of primary focus here wield quite an intense power, and their fates became linked in an unavoidable way. So the story does have plenty of fantastical nonsense for enthusiasts of the genre to enjoy. Bluehole really went all out and clearly had too much fun when designing this world, and that's a good thing. The gameplay is pretty easy going for quite a while, as you can do quite a large chunk of the story missions without much problem before things really get difficult and force you to get serious about the ins and outs of the classes and races. But once the difficulty does ramp up, it stays there, offering a good, relatively well-paced amount of challenge throughout. There should be at least one class here that speaks to you. Even though a lot of the character models look pretty good in terms of detail and design, the worlds themselves are somewhat bland in that department, and rarely bring you any designs or aesthetics that you haven't seen 1,000 times before. That being said, I wouldn't say that the worlds or dungeons quite cross over into boring territory, they're just unremarkable. For as detailed and interesting as the characters can be, I feel like it's an odd juxtaposition to play them in such a bland looking world. It's not to say there isn't diversity in the areas though, there certainly is. I just couldn't help but notice how shallow they ultimately are. That said, a lot of the effects are nice and really make me appreciate them, particle effects during combat in particular, and I wish they could have addressed this a little bit for the console version. I do still lean towards favorability of the graphics considering how old the game is and how well it seems to be holding up compared to other. The technical performance of Tera itself doesn't fare as well though, with inexcusably inconsistent frame rates that probably bring the average FPS down to under 30 and rampant texture and asset pop-up even on the PlayStation 4 Pro. When the action settles down, the performance certainly improves, but once things get busy, as they often do, expect the game to start chugging quite a bit. Thankfully, even though I found the performance drops unpleasant to look at, the gameplay largely remained intact, and that's really what matters, I suppose. And I have heard lots of talk about crashes, but personally, in my experience, I rarely encountered this. Leveling, crafting, learning new skills, all feels good overall. There's also a fairly good amount of skills to dive into, which is nice. Lots of gold can be had without too much grinding, and the skills are mostly fun to discover and learn once you gain access to them. On top of that, there's lots of weapon skins and cosmetic options for things, if you like that kind of thing. Music is pretty good, with some nice melodies sprinkled around the soundtrack. Even though you might not be rushing out to buy the soundtrack for your car, it does get the job done by providing nice emotional subcontext to a lot of the battles, and the tracks usually kept me motivated. Some of the tracks even momentarily teetered into greatness before retreating back into old generic RPG style chord structures, but I did enjoy the good moments enough to overlook the generic ones. Voices are also good. While I would have appreciated more of them, what is here is well voiced, and voices fit the characters well, and there's a good amount of variation in tones and delivery styles of different characters. The sound effects themselves could have had more punch to them though. Lots of the samples for various sounds are tacky and generic, and I feel like slightly more effort in this department could have gone a long way to helping establish some more personality for the game, which is another missed opportunity I think they could have easily addressed for the console version. Thankfully, what we have here is a well-designed game that nails the fundamentals of action-based online RPG gameplay. gameplay. What it lacks in performance, it makes up for in design, and what it lacks in complexity, it makes up for in overall fun factor. If you're interested in Tera, you have very little to lose by trying it out on consoles thanks to the freemium model it finds itself in. The world is nearly seamless and huge, the graphics are well designed and fun, and there's a lot to do in Tera without spending a dime if you don't want to. I personally got a little bored later on as the repetition definitely started getting to me, but as long as you keep your expectations in check and stop yourself from applying 2018 standards to it, there is a lot of fun to be had here. I just wish there was more of a reason for those who have already played it 3 years ago on their PCs to return. If you're an experienced dungeon crawler who's looking for the next step in complexity and depth, Tera might not be your jam. At least not in this day and age. But if you're mainly a console gamer and you're interested in dipping your toes into the MMO genre, the console version of Tera is a great place to start.
And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.